just by looking around. You get in your car, you drive around, you can see we've got issues. On the other hand, we also have a major advantage if we would use it. That is, Oakland has many individuals and well-established civic organizations and trade associations that really want to be part of the solution to the problems of housing in Oakland. So setting the stage for creating better housing opportunities and outcomes through collaboration is one of the goals of today's discussion. Collaboration between all housing stakeholders, including homeowners, renters, real estate professionals, housing providers, lenders, and city officials. This is the only way the real estate, or I should say, real lasting progress on housing can be made. In preparation for today's discussion, we provided our panelists with a short list of questions that represent a small cross-section of the concerns of housing providers and real estate professionals. So let's begin by giving our panelists the opportunity to answer the questions that we've asked them thus far in writing. Panelists, are you ready?
Yes.
Thumbs up if you're ready. Thumbs up.
Those are some loud crickets. Okay, so this question, the first question, is directed at our council members. We all know that there are inequalities in home ownership based on race and ethnicity. We also know that owning a home is a major source of wealth building generationally for households. Knowing this, what steps as city officials will you be taking to help close the disparity gap in home ownership? I will allow the first council person to answer that question. In fact, if we don't get a quick volunteer, I'm going to call.
Sure. See, we're all being so polite because we're assuming that you were going to call on us. So, you know, we all go these things together, and we don't want to be rude to each other. But,
well,
you know,
I
be always ready.
I hate to say it, Rebecca, but you have such name recognition that I was going to call on you first.
All right.
Good.
Then.
She's the vice mayor. Let her speak first.
There we go.
Bless you, my colleague, my neighbor, my Peace Wing compatriot, Treva Reed. Good evening. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Rebecca Kaplan, and I'm honored to serve as your citywide elected council member at large and also the vice mayor of the city of Oakland. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you all tonight and to really strategize together about further steps we can take to build equal access to housing opportunity and greater access to housing opportunity. This is actually an issue I worked on even before being elected to the city council. I worked, I was an attorney, and I worked with the Oakland city attorney on a program to push back against predatory lending and deceptive foreclosures that were based on deceptive loans with big jumps in rates. And one of the things that came out of that work, that a lot of those mortgages that were marketed in 2007, 2008, disproportionately to Black people, that would say on the first page in big font, you know, it's a 1% interest rate. And in teeny tiny text on the bottom of page 23, it would say, that's only for the first 6 months. Then your interest rate is going to go to here and then here and then here. And those deceptive mortgages were pushed on widows, were pushed on people who didn't have huge fiscal expertise, and were pushed with some deceptive marketing by some big banks that were just trying to rack up a lot of these refinances where they were being deceptively marketed. And that is one of the things that has undermined Black home ownership in Oakland in recent years, is those predatory foreclosures that came out of those loans. So working both from a public education perspective about what to watch out for in a loan, as well as trying to legally fight the big banks for some of their predatory foreclosure practices, is some of the perspective I come from. And, you know, that problem's not entirely over. Certainly there was more of it going on then, but it's not completely gone. And that continues to be something to watch out for. A similar issue, but on a different angle of the perspective, is just not being able to get loans. So not only the case of mortgages with bad terms, but African Americans disproportionately being turned down for loans as another component that is undermining Black home ownership, not only in Oakland, but certainly also in Oakland, and also, of course, the issue of discriminatory appraisals and properties being appraised lower with African American occupants, and thus Black people having thus perceived as less home equity because of how the discrimination in appraisals is going on. And so I see all of those as things we need to fight, both with public outreach and education, but also when we can, to bring a legal action if a bank is behaving in an illegal way, or other parties to those transactions. And I'm also interested in strategizing with you on proactive things that we can do with the City of Oakland's first-time homebuyer assistance program in order to both make it bigger, because there's just not enough money total in the program, but I'd also be interested in strategizing with you about other changes you might want to recommend to how the program is run, what the cutoffs are for who's eligible, and other things we could do to improve the usefulness of that program so that we can use it to strengthen Black home ownership.
So I'm glad that you say that you want to strategize with us, because that was a part of this question, which is how can the Realtist and other housing stakeholders participate in the efforts that you're talking about?
Yes, did you want to hear from my colleagues, or do you want me to answer that first?
No, we want you to answer that one, then we'll go to your colleagues.
Cool. So yes, absolutely. So, I know that the down payment assistance program doesn't reach enough people, but we've also heard questions about, are the qualifications enough? Is it too hard if you want to do, for example, a duplex, which might then give revenue to support the property? And so since you all are so deeply embedded in this as Realtists, and bless you for that, my hope is, as we could prepare to bring legislation to amend and strengthen the down payment assistance program, that I would love to invite you all, and I don't know if you want to have sort of like a subgroup on this, that would want to compile suggestions for what would be the components that would be most important to amend in that program, including, who's eligible, how it's targeted, what the requirements are, and other ideas you may have, so that we can make that a more effective program for our community, and particularly for Black home ownership. And one specific example I would give is, often the programs say you have to be living in Oakland at the time that you apply, but a large segment of Oakland's longstanding Black community has been displaced in the most recent years. And so someone who used to live in Oakland and now lives in Antioch, and wants to come back to Oakland and invest in Oakland, we should look at incorporating that into some of the eligibility, and as well as the duplex issue I've heard about being a potential way that more people could be able to afford it if they could have the revenue from a second unit. Something else I should add that I'm already working on is making it easier in general in Oakland to add accessory dwelling units, ADUs, in-law apartments, which can be another way for non-wealthy homeowners to be able to stabilize an income stream, or a place to have a caregiver, so people can age in place. And so that's also something I'd be interested to work together on, in terms of making it easier to have secondary units where that's useful and appropriate as well.
Very good. Thank you very much. And so let's ask Treva the same question. Treva, should I read that question for you again, or do you have that in front of you?
You can read it again.
Okay. We all know that there are inequalities in home ownership based on race and ethnicity. We also know that owning a home is a major source of wealth building generationally for households. So knowing this, what steps as an elected official will you be taking to close the disparity gap in home ownership, and how can we participate?
I think Vice Mayor Kaplan just spoke to a number of policies that have been progressing prior to me coming onto council. I'm 3 months, just shy over 3 months here. And so I probably support it more through partnering with council members, and when I work for Senator Nancy Skinner, when she was in the State Assembly, on ensuring more housing related policies that advocated and advanced more equitable policies around our community especially dealing with the disparities that we're facing. So as we're going through the budget process now, we certainly can ensure that we have policies and funding allocation that work to preserve and prioritize more equitable funding decisions to address those disparity gaps in home ownerships and help to fund those programs that are existing. I can speak about some of those programs that I know that are moving forward, but just to speak generally about the past, I've supported, certainly you all have heard this in the process of coming into office, I've supported strengthening rent control, just cause protection, certainly tenant protection ordinances, as I also have advocated for foreclosure protections and how we expand those programs to really help communities who are impacted. And we know those communities that are most impacted are Black community members. So advocating for tax abatements, advocating for the affordable home ownership programs and funding to sustain those, advocating for anti-displacement funding through past COVID care funding and the funding that we have now through the American Rescue Plan. As Vice Mayor Kaplan said, making sure that we do have those increased opportunities to build ADU units where it's appropriate, making sure that we work in partnership with our state and federal partners where there's opportunity to advance funding for subsidized housing programs and initiatives that benefit us. I bought my first home through an affordable home ownership program that was a tax abated property. I understand the value of home ownership and what it does for single moms like me, for families who have already been strapped and struggling with a number of equity issues, pay equity, career equity, where we've not had the opportunity to come into these ownership opportunities to best sustain our family. One of the opportunities that we have now in council is that Vice Mayor Kaplan and council members prior to me coming here advanced the disparity study. And so we now have even greater data around issues that have impacted us, not just the ability to get a home, but the ability to sustain a home and how we ensure that our Black and women-owned businesses have the ability to have that capital and that investment to put forth into those housing opportunities and to sustain the housing that they get. We've lost a number of families in Oakland due to displacement, due to eviction. The greatest number of those who face those inequities are Black. The greatest number of those who are unhoused are Black. And so we have to take the data-driven approach to how we advance equity in the funding of the programs that we do have. Keep Oakland Housed is a program within the city. That funding program that went through last year with some additional funding through COVID, it primarily served over 35% Black and very low income families. And I believe the more that we can focus our attention on programs that target those who have the greatest disparities, who are facing the greatest wealth gaps and inequities, and being able to come into home ownership and be sustained in their home, are the ways that we need to target those decisions. There's some legislation now at the state level. It's called the California Dream for All. It's a first-time home buyers program. This program would allow Californians, and certainly we will advocate for Oaklanders to be able to purchase their first home. Not sure all the details around the silent partner and how that really benefits our community, but I'm certainly looking to see through this program how it can be used to benefit reducing the cost for home buying, particularly for Black family members. The city has the first time mortgage assistant program, and that's a critical program that allows us the ability to purchase home. And you all know more about the programs than I do. And so like Rebecca shared, it's about having you at the table with us to guide us through these strategies and solutions to address the inequities and to come up with some solutions to help us overcome them.
Well, thank you, Treva, and I appreciate that you, in telling us, your thoughts on this and some things that you worked on before, have connected to the fact in that last point that you made that we really want Oakland to take advantage of the fact that they have a big resource in the form of us individuals who are working with housing every day. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Are there any other, did you want to say something else?
Well, no, I'll just say there are no decisions that we can make without those who are as closely connected to those that we want to serve, who are serving and working and lifting these efforts without you at the table. And so I'm one of the newer council members. And so I'm looking to glean and remain in relationship with you as I was this past year, moving forward through the coming years to know how we can effectively target programs and funding and opportunities that benefit communities that are most underrepresented and not served in the home buying process. And we know those are our Black community members.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So do we have any other council members who would like to answer that same question? If not, we'll move to the next question.
Okay, hi, I can answer on behalf of Councilmember Lauren Taylor, if that's okay.
Sure, it's definitely okay. Thank
Great.
you.
Pamela Farron again. I am a Senior Policy Advisor and also the Chief of Staff to Councilmember Lauren Taylor, who represents District 6 in East Oakland, also where I live here in District 6. I wanted to share a few thoughts. It's difficult to follow Vice Mayor Kaplan and Councilmember Reed. They are such great speakers, but I'll do my best. I think we're in a room of family, so I'll do my best to share some of
And don't worry, we've got 5 other questions, so you'll have plenty of opportunity.
Thank you. First thing I'd like to say is Councilmember Taylor, of course, would have been here had he not had another engagement at the same time, a prior engagement. This is an organization that of course, he holds in really high regard and would have been here if he could. I think he's participated in the past and looks forward to participating in the future. One thing I like to first just start off, Councilmember Taylor has, I think, a balanced perspective on some of these issues that you've talked about. He's a former real estate agent himself, was a former renter. He also owned property that he rented out to tenants and is a property owner himself. So he kind of understands a lot of the issues from a lot of different sides. And I think most people have seen on the council that he's tried to balance as much as possible all the differing needs that you've also described. Of course, he agrees with the group that home ownership is really important to lift up, particularly in the Black community. It has been a way for many folks to be upwardly mobile and pull themselves out of poverty to move into the middle class, to have an asset that appreciates in our society is really important and something that we need to encourage and support. It's also important to focus on keeping folks in the home. One of the things that has been important to him is to make sure that the homes stay in the family, like Big Mama's house, Grandma's house, and how do we support families holding on to those properties. So I know one of the things that he's looking at is the probate system. And in fact, that was a policy that came out of the last budget cycle that is part of the city, is working with the county to figure out ways that we can make a better probate system so that these homes stay in the Black community and they retain intergenerational, we retain our intergenerational wealth, which is always very important. Especially in my age group, we had a lot of our parents and grandparents who owned property. And it's been a struggle for those of us who are in the following generations to hold on to those properties for various reasons. And we need to have more programs that support that. One of those gaps we know is also when, I think someone mentioned in the chat, there's so much chat going on, it's hard to keep up, but I did think I saw something that also Councilmember Taylor has lifted up is the maintenance of homes, that sometimes when they inherit the properties, they're not able to hold on to them and lose some of that equity because they're not able to provide the necessary repairs to the property. So we need to look at programs that will help people gain access to funds so that they can repair the homes, and perhaps if they want to sell them to someone or what have you, but they're able to retain those properties and that asset and take care of it. Just because you inherit a home that's even paid off, it may be in disrepair, and that's not something that we want to keep as a barrier to home ownership.
Sure.
Also want to mention that, Councilmember Taylor has participated in the programs with the county assessor on home ownership. That's another important way to get the word out the different home ownership programs. I'd also like to point out, I'm going to put it in the chat, but Councilmember Taylor's recently, all of the council members did submit their budget priorities, each council district. And I would point out in his, and I'll put it in the chat, in addition to like a high priority, like a clean, attractive streets, but number 4 of his priorities was ending the push out and price out of our long-term residents. He has consistently lifted that up as a high priority. And in particular, he has a section on investments in transitional and long-term housing solutions. And in that, he talks about the acquisition of county-owned, county tax-delined properties for conversion to deeply affordable housing. He also listed the bullet of increasing funding to support Oakland's first-time homebuyer program, including down payment assistance and funding for long-term current and formerly displaced Oakland residents. Many of my friends, like me, who grew up in the Bay Area, a lot of my friends have had to move out to Antioch and other areas, as the Vice Mayor mentioned, in order to find more affordable housing. We'd love to find a way to attract those residents back.
Okay. So
And also, sorry?
we're going to, we've got 5 other questions. Did you want to add anyone? Last thing?
That's good.
Okay, we'll come back. So we're going to move to our second question, which is a question that can be addressed to all city officials. We know that some renters have difficulty being able to afford their rent. The COVID-19 pandemic has made this worse. Looking beyond just an eviction moratorium, what does the city propose as an equitable solution or alternatives to eviction notices to tenants who are unable to pay their rent? Is Rebecca on the call?
I sure am on the call. And,
Okay, we'll come back to you.
Excellent. Yes, actually, so the City of Oakland is actually undertaking a direct funding assistance program. And I know we also have our HCD director on the line as well. So I don't know if Director Olatwe would like to speak to that as well. But we have, with funding that we've received, both federal funding and state funding and local funding, we have put aside money to help in these particular situations. And those programs have been authorized. They've already passed council to authorize the use of these funds for these efforts. And so I don't know if others want to add more detail about that, but that approval has already happened to authorize those uses.
Thank you. I'd love to hear from Shola.
Good evening, and thank you, everyone. My name is Shola Olatwe, and I'm director of the city's Housing and Community Development Department. I know some folks here. I want to also acknowledge our council members, our partners in this important vocation of public service. So just a couple of things specific to your question, Vice Mayor Kaplan is absolutely right. With the CARES Act, which was federal resources that the federal government provided to cities last fall, we pushed out close to $5 million to Oakland residents. And our program was very specific to focus on people who were at 50% and below area median income. And we know that most of those people are Black people. So we served over 1,400 households for that effort. More than 40% of those folks were African American, and 70% were, broadly people of color. So always, and that was a really, for anyone who's been following kind of the federal resources, that was a really compressed time to get resources into the hands of residents to keep people housed. And Councilmember Reed mentioned our our work with Keep Oakland Housed, which is really just a moniker of various community-based organizations, Roots, Backs, and others who are closer to the ground, who can actually provide direct rental assistance with our resources, as well as important eviction support and legal support as well. Most recently, as Vice Mayor said, we are pushing out, we launched it on April 1st, our emergency rental assistance program, which is over $12 million. That is, again, completely focused on Oakland residents at or below 50% of area median income. People can be eligible for upwards of 6 months of back rent, as well as 3 months of prospective rent. And if you need more, you do have to reapply if you get a grant as large for that total of 9 months. But again, it is really focused on keeping people who are housed, because I think the other, I think it's kind of impressive that we've been talking for almost a half hour. We've not mentioned the pandemic. The pandemic has really revealed things that many of us already know to be true, that our Black neighbors and family members are disproportionately affected by the high cost of housing. More than 2/3 of Black people in Oakland are paying more than 30% of their income towards rent. So we know that this is an issue that is very very specific and harmful to Black people. So one, that program, our rental assistance program, it is, I will put the website in the chat. That is specifically for renters. There was a question about homeowners, because that is what we're talking about as well. We also have a program with our partners at HERA and NHS, thank you, that works specifically with homeowners to keep them in their homes, to assist them should they be facing issues around paying their mortgage. I will also note that the emergency rental assistance program is actually going to support, it is not only supporting and paying that rent, it is also, meant to support the folks, the landlords, right? So actually helping paying for the potential back rent and ultimately the mortgage payments that our families might be living. You also might qualify for back utility payments as well. So we're really trying to provide resources where we know they are most impactful, particularly for those folks at the income levels that we're focused on. And I'll just close by saying, as the housing professional, I'll leave the policy and the sort of broader political conversations to obviously to our elected officials, but as the person that was asked to lead this department, a couple of things with regard to home ownership. And my mother also bought our first home through our city's first time homeowner program. Treva and I talked about this, and what that did for our family in terms of changing the trajectory of my single mother's life was tremendous. The city's current first time homeownership program is actually unfunded. The city historically has funded that program with revolving with the interest payments that we get from other residential loans. So we've actually not had any sort of specific direct allocations. In the 2019 year, that program was about $498,000, and we created 10 new homeowners. So imagine if we were to increase that by 50%, 100%, those would be new homeowners in the city of Oakland. 40% of those 10 new homeowners were African Americans, and at least one of them, and that is the program requirement, at least one of them have to be currently an Oakland resident. The rest of the people do not.
Thank you, Shola.
Can I just add one last thing? We'll just say is that
sure.
there is a the way that the city has funded that program is through those interest payments and also by leveraging state resources. So you asked the question about what can this group do? Really, the advocacy around the importance of Oakland getting additional state resources to leverage that program is really critical. We cannot do it on our own. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shola. I've been advised by our sponsor that we need to, I need to ask that our answers be kept to 2 minutes. But now that I get to that particular guideline, one of the questions that I would not mind if you elaborated on is the next question, but we'll try to keep it to 2 minutes. In fact, Shola, maybe since you were just talking, we'll let you start with this one. The question is, and we'll try to go for 2 minutes so that we can get all 6 questions in.
I'm a New Yorker, I'll talk fast.
Thank you. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted many renters, leaving some unable to pay their rent due to job disruption, et cetera. The pandemic has also impacted housing providers who, as we know, need the timely payment of rent in order to provide housing services. Many of these owners, particularly small property owners and African-American property owners, are hurting because some tenants have concluded that an eviction moratorium is a rent payment moratorium and have stopped paying rent even as they have not experienced job disruptions. So can you speak to what options these small property owners might have under this circumstance?
Absolutely. One, I'm going to put the website in the chat for homeowners and renters who are experiencing, whether that be income loss so that they are unable to pay rent, or homeowners who are, have tenants who have not paid rent. Because part of this, what's been so insidious about this pandemic is the impact that it's had on people who are renting their homes and our small property owners, which
well, here we're just trying to address that situation where the person actually can pay the rent, but they don't because the moratorium makes them think it's a rent payment moratorium, not an eviction moratorium.
Well, one, I think there's a communication, issue, which we have certainly worked with. And again, going back to how you can help us, right? Like this is about an eviction moratorium, right? Like not pushing people out on the street, keeping people housed so that we continue to have, so that we don't add to the public health crises that we're already facing. So that's the first thing. Second thing is if property owners are facing this issue, we do have resources for them. One, whether it be, sample letters that they could send to their tenants. One, two, they can also consult some of our counselors within our rent adjustment program that is also there for them. So, I think part of this is it will require some conversation between renter and property owner, and also, but if that is not successful, we do have resources that can actually help the homeowner remain current. And the other thing I would just say is homeowners, you should not be, for the most part, receiving foreclosure notices from your lenders at this time, given that there still is a federal moratorium on foreclosures. So one, we have resources. Two, there are some technical assistance in terms of letters, in terms of suggested ways in which one might negotiate with the tenant. And we are here to support those activities.
Thank you, Shola. Can Councilmember Kaplan and also Reed, could you give us 2 minutes, your thoughts on that as well?
Sure. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Sure. So no, there is not a rent moratorium. There is, and it's an eviction moratorium, not a rent moratorium. And so, to the extent, if anybody was confused about that, I think Director Olatwe correctly pointed out, they can contact our rent adjustment program. They can contact our housing counselors and get further information that way. But no, there is not a rent moratorium, and people who have not lost income are not supposed to be not paying their rent.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Councilmember,
I would add to that. I fully agree with both Director Olatoya and Vice Mayor Kaplan. And the programs that we have are really to help those who need help. And there are a number of people who need help. And then we know that there are people who are just bad actors who have taken advantage of the eviction moratorium. And we've got to work to hold them accountable and liable for not gaming the system during an incredibly painful time that so many are experiencing. And so I believe that as we partner and work together with forums and discussions, certainly this forum here is one of many like-minded partners having the broader conversations with our community to help them understand, again, the programs that are available, who they're available for, and why we need to really work to navigate through these times without taking advantage of the opportunity to not pay rent. I think it's unfortunate that many people who have systemically have felt deserved and have not felt invested in, see this as an opportunity to also get back what they feel that they may have lost or have deserved through the system. And I think we're dealing with a number of deep-rooted and seated, behaviors and patterns that are not just about the pandemic that we're facing, but about some long-term and systemic issues and challenges. But I believe that the more that we can educate and inform and engage our community, come together, advocating with your organization into communities where we may have influence and opportunity to be heard, to address the concerns and to educate around the programs, why they're available, who they are to help, and long-term, really how it helps to sustain us all by ensuring that we honor the programs and policies that are before us.
thank you. Thank you.
Roland, it's okay if I chime in a little bit too? I know
Yes.
it wasn't specifically called. And I'll try to keep my time. Sorry, I'm just not used to talking. And I am a lawyer by trade, and sometimes I keep going on. But I would
2 minutes.
I would encourage folks to contact our rent adjustment program, as everyone has mentioned. Under Director Olatoye, there is a fabulous program that has a lot of resources for folks that they may not know about, for renters and property owners at the same time, including payments can be made to property owners, and tenants can get the assistance. And also there's some state assistance that's available too. So people should not feel like they're out on their own with no resources. Again, under that RAP program, there is a great mediation program that folks can take part in and come to some agreements, because that's really the best case for everyone. And and there are advisors, as the director mentioned, that can help people navigate this process. They've done a great job. They're going to do even more outreach. They're going to go on KBLX to really get the word out. It's a really a great and robust program, one of the best under our director in the city. So I really encourage folks to not feel like they're on their own and reach out.
Thank you. Thank you.
And if you don't happen to have the chat window open, so you didn't notice these links popping up in the chat, we have put the links for those websites where that information is located into the chat box as well.
Thank you, Rebecca. So we have a question which is addressed to all. Speaking specifically of renters who wish to go from renting to home ownership, please speak to opportunities sponsored or supported by the City of Oakland to create home ownership opportunities, and are they funded?
Well, I'll just take that. I mean, currently the city's first time home buyer program is not funded. We have an application before the state for $3 million. We have scored incredibly high. We hope to hear a final, a final award. That $3 million will need, will be matched hopefully with a city council allocation for resources, and we can restart that program. Again, the resources in the chat, folks can put their name on a list. And as soon as we are able to reopen up that program, we will be pushing out that information with this group and others so that folks have access to that information and can begin the process. But as of now, it is not funded. And that is a real gap for us as a city.
So Stephanie, did you want to add anything there?
Yes, actually, I am the chair of the Housing Committee for Bridge Association of Realtors. And we did present to the City Council back in 2020 a request to enhance funding, make sustainable funding for these particular programs because they have been so impactful to the community, and in particular to the members of the African American community. Between 2015 and 2020, 103 families were able to use the program to purchase homes, and 35% of them were African American. And the impact of that is substantial. That was using, I think, the MAP program. I am unsure which programs you are funding because it is the, you have the CalHome, the MAP, and the SAM. And my understanding that the most recent funding was going to be allocated towards the CalHome, which is 80% area median income or less, which is probably the least impactful. The CalHome, of course, the MAP program goes up to 120%, which includes workforce. So when you have the MAP, you're funding CalHome and not the MAP, which the MAP covers a larger breadth of people and people who will be more likely to utilize the funds and purchase. I would request that you consider where you put that funding. Additionally, the SAM program, which is the Shared Appreciation Program, I've experienced all of the programs that you have, and the MAP is the most effective. It's fair market value. It's $75,000, a silent second loan. With the SAM, it's shared appreciation. And when a person tries to go back, sell the house, refinance, the city ends up taking a greater portion. And the whole point of these programs is to allow you to move forward. And anecdotally, I had an experience with a veteran who had the SAM program, and just looking at the difference of what he would have to return versus between the MAP and the SAM was significant, and it was harmful to him. So what we would love to see is have conversations with you about how the money is allocated to the different funding programs, because they're exceptional. You can layer with them. We have been able to put so many people. I ran the Oakland Housing Authority first-time homebuyer program using the voucher. And I could suggest that over 90% of the people that purchased used the MAP and the voucher program to buy homes. And I know that there are over 100 people in home ownership in the city of Oakland who have used the MAP, the voucher, and other layered programs. So these programs need to be sustained. They should have ongoing funds. They lost it with the loss of redevelopment program. There should be no time, in my opinion, and I really appreciate the fact that you all are talking about funding these programs. They should consistently be funding, because on top of that, when you're in the middle of a transaction, if those monies are gone and they've relied on those funds, they can't close the transaction. And I think the work you're doing is so impactful, and I would love to see statistics on the SAM versus the MAP versus CalHome and how many people purchased. But to just be clear, since the funding has been reduced, we had, like I said, 103 between 2015 and 20, and then subsequently between 2016 and 21, we only had 69 closings of transactions. That's a significant drop. So I would encourage you to really look at those programs. They need to be sustained.
Well, Stephanie, that kind of leads to the last question that we have here that I'm going to throw out. Because we've been talking about collaboration, and the discussion or the points that you just mentioned relate specifically to the collaboration that we can provide or engage in with the city, because we are on the ground on a daily basis. We see what's going on and we see what's impactful and what's less impactful. So the last question is, as realtists, we are involved with housing situations on a daily basis. We are the experts in facilitating home sales, home purchases, and home rentals. Because of these daily activities, we have information concerning the state of the local housing market, that would be very useful for city officials as you seek to make housing-related decisions. We believe our input would be a valuable resource for the city in creating housing policy. We believe our activities and our experiences are a big asset to the city if the city would take advantage of that. So what can we do to assist the city to attain its goals regarding housing for Oakland residents? And how can we stay in communication with you and your staff so that we can be at the table to provide input to help solve both current and future housing-related issues? And I'd like to throw that question directly to Councilmember Kaplan.
Thank you so much. Well, they do say the goal should be to be always ready. So, because you never know the time nor the hour when you may be called upon. So, yes, absolutely. So I have put my direct email address in the chat. I would love to make sure that we continue to stay in touch and work on this. The City of Oakland budget process for the coming 2 years is just starting. The mayor's proposal will be coming out in May, and the council members will also have an opportunity to propose amendments. I do think that specific examples about how to make our programs more effective, such as Stephanie's point that, you know, some of these programs that says will help you buy a house, but only if you're so poor you can't qualify for the other mortgage you need besides the home buyer assistance to buy the rest of it, right, really puts people in a lose-lose. And I'll be curious to follow up to make sure in terms of the state funding, what the limitations are that we've applied for, and make sure that we are not cutting off people who we don't have to cut off. I think for a lot of these programs, with the way home prices are now, you have to go to 120% AMI. If you're cutting off at 80, you're going to end up just frustrating people who are going to go through a lot of rigmarole and then be told they can't qualify for the underlying mortgage anyway. So I think we really need to make sure we're truly helping people in a way that is effective. And I also think, to the point that was in one of your first questions, which is a way for families to build wealth and even to build transgenerational wealth, that some of the programs that were more focused on just get people into a house by whatever means were used then systems like some of these shared equity, where it wasn't based on building wealth. It was based on just, you know, get them into a house, but not taking that long-term vision of, you know, is this going to be an asset that they're going to be able to send their kids to college with, right? And so I think that perspective of that we should be looking both of how do we get someone into a home, but also how do we enable the building of wealth long-term. And so I appreciate the suggestion to prioritize the MAP over some of the other programs. I think that is great and useful feedback. So thank you for that. One of the other things I'm working on that I would love to collaborate with you all on is helping there be construction of more housing units, right? In addition to making sure that the units are made accessible effectively to Black buyers, there's also that there just are not enough available homes total. And so part of how we fix it is by enabling the construction of more homes. And that includes taking vacant city-owned land and making it available to be developed. And that includes making it easier for homeowners to add another unit onto their house, right? There's a bunch of different types of steps, making permits to build houses faster to get than they are, so we don't have a city-created lag time that drags down the development process, right? So looking at it both in terms of making it easier to buy the homes that already exist with things like MAP, but also helping to enable more development so that there is more supply out there so more people can be helped.
Thank you. Thank you. I have run out of my time on this segment, but I want to ask Council Member Reed to give us a minute on that one question, because you're a new council member, but we want to help you and we want to know how we can be a part of helping you, as with Council Member Kaplan, to solve the problems that are related to housing in Oakland. If you could just give us a minute of your thoughts.
Yeah, well, we absolutely need and value your voice. So this here is an incredible opportunity to continue building relationship with you and having your advocacy with us, not just here, but at our city council meetings, at our policy area meetings within committee discussions, having conversations with town hall forums. We had a town hall forum for our district, and engaging you more around having forums that help you to inform and educate and engage our community. Particularly with the resources that you know that are available that we may not be aware of, and just critical financial paths that we may not have tapped into. Certainly MAP is a strong pathway for us to provide ownership, but there are other areas as housing experts that we want to hear from you and rely on you. This is an incredible space. Having Director Olatoye, having our city leaders, having community members who've actually been impacted or have benefited from programs and services, I think would also be helpful. I mentioned my first home was an affordable home ownership program, and me being able to tap into a lot of those city programs. And so you helping to advocate at every level of government for these tax abatements, for the increased federal and state funding for permanent subsidized housing programs and affordable home ownership programs is going to be helpful. I have Oak Knoll being developed in our district, ensuring that Oak Knoll and the land that is owned by the city in that is cultivated for affordable home ownership programs for our community members. And I think even broadly is like, how do you help us even close the wealth gap? What are opportunities that you can help contribute to conversations around how we sustain our family with family sustaining jobs, and how we develop these career pathways and address the pipelines and education inequity, pay inequities, and other things that really help to sustain them beyond the benefit of getting them into the home, addressing the racially exclusive practices and policies that we are still working to overcome, even at the city level. How you can advocate through your power with building more transit-oriented housing development, tapping into state funding like our cap and trade funds, and low-income tax credit initiatives, sources that you're familiar with that we may not be most utilizing. So as Vice Mayor Kaplan shared, we are well below stock, and you know this, in our pipeline to build housing. We are only having achieved 14% of our regional allocation goal for building housing. For building more affordable housing. And so how do we ensure that in that regional allocation, we can help ensure that there are more affordable home ownership units that are being built up into that pipeline versus the luxury housing market that has been before us, that has outweighed the capacity for us to accommodate those who need to be kept and preserved in housing.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Stay in touch with us. I'll make sure that I drop my information here. Rosa Velasquez, who is a policy district director on our team, is here as well. So I'll put our contact information for you to reach out, stay in touch, and let me know in East Oakland. My district is from the Coliseum to the San Leandro border. It's from the Oakland Airport and the waterfront up to the Oakland Zoo. And so if you are engaged in programs and outreach and looking to partner, particularly in that area, as we're looking at citywide approaches, I look forward to hearing from you and gleaning and growing with you through this opportunity to keep our community housed and get into housing for wealth equity opportunities.
Thank you. We're about ready to take questions from the audience. Did you want to say something briefly, Councilmember Kaplan?
That was me, actually.
Okay.
And I think an
Briefly,
important,
because we're going to have a lot of
briefly,
questions. Yes.
I think an important part of this conversation are the lenders. The lenders are not at this table. And for so many Black homeowners, having a lender relationship is really critical. So what else can this group do? Bringing those lenders to the table to talk about what they are doing to support your goal, I think would be really, really critical.
That was valuable input. You're right. That is a particular thing that's missing here. And going forward, I think we'll make sure to add lenders in. So thank you. Now we're ready to take questions from our audience. Georgia?
Well, first of all, thank you guys so much. We appreciate your participation. That was very rich. I am going to throw a 7th question in here that was felt to be very important to also direct toward our panelists. And one of our members, Shaniqua Badger, is going to present that question to you.
Hi there. Thank you all for joining us tonight. My name is Shaniqua Badger. I own a real estate team out of the wonderful city of Oakland, and I'm also a director for ARPB. This conversation is encouraging and needs to be continued. So again, thank you all for joining us. One of the questions that I had was, as you probably know already, is there's a high barrier of entry for Black people to get into homeownership. So now if we look at the expenses it takes to close an escrow in the city of Oakland, and I have them written down because I needed notes. You have the city transfer tax, then you have the sewer lateral, you have the sidewalk compliance, you have the Measure Q tax for vacant lots, you have the assessment for affordable housing if you want to sell or buy a vacant lot. And then on top of that, you throw in tenant protection. Tell me, if you all can, where does the money from all of those assessments go? What do they fund?
Well, I can take a piece of this and I'll just say, I feel your pain, as my husband and I are currently trying to buy our first home here in the city of Oakland, and
Oh, you need an agent?
sticker shock is all I have to say, sticker shock. And yeah, that's a whole other discussion. So one of the, I think, critical sort of in your question is, these are the resources that the city uses to support its activities. The city budget, and our colleagues in government know this better, is about $690 million for a city of almost 430,000 people. That is not a lot of money for the resources and the need for this city. I will tell you the affordable housing impact fee is just one fee that we utilize. Our department, the Housing and Community Development Department, uses to actually put back out on the street to build housing. What Vice Mayor Kaplan said and Councilmember Reed, we simply do not have enough units. And so that is, and there is I will put it in the chat, there is a report on how those resources have been used, where that money has gone for the specific 612 new construction units that are currently underway. And more than a third of them are for extremely low income people. So that I can speak to the direct connection as to how those resources are being spent, and I'll defer to my colleagues on the other pieces.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Our housing community development director is amazing, by the way. So let me just add, in terms of some of these other costs that are layered on top of the home buying process, the sidewalk ordinance and the sewer lateral. So those are really unfortunate because they cost a lot of money to the buyer, but it's not like it costs money to the buyer and then, well, at least the city gets money to use to build affordable housing. This is a lose-lose. It costs money to the buyer and the city does not get money out of it. Those are just costs that are spent on doing a sewer lateral inspection or sewer lateral repair or a sidewalk inspection or a sidewalk repair. So it's both money out, and it isn't even, unlike the other fees, unlike the impact fees, which at least then something good comes out of it on the other end. This is just an expense. And so something I would love to partner with you all on is the two that don't even generate any useful money, the sidewalk repair and the sewer lateral. I would love to work on fixing those. And I took a step in that direction in the council budget amendments that we passed on Monday. Thank you to my colleagues. We passed them unanimously. I put money in my budget proposal. This item probably got the least discussion because it wasn't about policing or not policing, but I put in money for a sidewalk repair startup funding for the city to do proactive sidewalk repair instead of having sidewalk repair be done at point of sale, which is actually the least efficient way to do it because you're doing a couple squares at a time instead of doing a whole block that might need it at a time. So I put funding in the budget amendment that passed for the city to start up a proactive sidewalk repair system. And then on the sewer lateral, which is also a barrier at point of sale, that is overseen by a court consent decree involving the EPA and East Bay Mud. And so we would need to build a regional collaboration because that is over Oakland, Berkeley, and other cities in the East Bay Mud area, but it is an incredible impediment. And like the sidewalk repair, it's a really ineffective way to deal with sewer systems. It would make much more sense for those to be done, you know, a street at a time instead of just whichever house happens to be up for sale, whether it needs it or not. So I would love to work on changing that. That's going to require more than just Oakland at the table. The sidewalk one we could do internally to Oakland. So that might be something we could work on. And then the last thing I wanted to share about the vacant property tax. One is if you're in the process of listing it, selling it, buying it, you are exempt. So make sure that if that's something that's worrying you or someone you're working with, that they are exempt from the vacant property tax during that process. And then here's another exemption that I think we need to publicize more. And maybe Director Latwe, we could work together on how to publicize this more. So, you know, we have all these people living in RVs, right? And the people living in RVs, an RV could be an asset or it could be a liability depending where it is. If it's somewhere with no plumbing hookups, you're dumping sewage in the street, the RV is a liability. But if you had a safe place to park it with hookups, then the RV is an asset. That person is in an RV rather than lying on the sidewalk. It's a much better life. So if you own a vacant lot in Oakland, you can fill out a form and then be allowed to rent the lot to someone to live in an RV on the lot, and you're allowed to charge money for that. And then the lot is not considered vacant, so you don't have to pay the vacant property tax, and you can bring in revenue from renting it to someone in an RV, or you can live there yourself or your relative in an RV on that vacant lot, and then it's no longer considered vacant for the vacant property tax. And I think we should do a better job publicizing that and helping owners of vacant lots get qualified for that and get matched to prospective RV dwellers so that someone can be then off the street and someone can have revenue and not have to pay the vacant property tax.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, one more thing before I finish, and I want to go back to the conversation about the commitment that you all have to this body of people. This body of people, specifically, our advocacy is around Black home ownership. And there was a lot of policy, and there's been a lot of policy that has been on the table and that we've seen pass through city council that has impacted our buyers, our sellers, and our community. And so it's very important, and we haven't been at the table, and we absolutely should be at the table. It should be a no-brainer that this body be at the table when any of those conversations around housing come up. So I look forward to making sure that we have a continued relationship so we can have these conversations. We can be a part of the be a part of the solution and not have to be reactive and continue to address things that impact and undermine the wealth generation in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shaniqua. And I want to thank the council members that responded to your question. They had questions ahead of time. You weren't prepared for that, but of course, like Vice Mayor said, you got to be ready, right? So we appreciate that you took that question. It was a very important question to be interjected into the conversation. We do have, according to my clock here, about another 15 minutes or so for questions from the audience. And I wanted to go to Eric Harris to see if there were any questions that you pulled from chat that have not been responded to already, so that we're not repeating. Is there something in the chat in the form of a question that we haven't addressed?
The first question is, of course, my phone rings right at the time. The first question is from Brother Allende. And Brother Allende's question It was in the chat. I took a picture of it, but of course my phone rang, and now I have to go to the question. So it's at the top.
Gosh.
Why are we not purchasing property as a collective to house Black people? Why are we not pushing proactive legislation to protect Oakland homeowners, i.e. freezes on property taxes and mortgages? Why are we not making developers provide low-income housing to balance their market properties? So
Okay, so using the moderator's prerogative, give us one question out of those three. You choose.
well, they can pick whatever they want out of those. Those are pretty, we'll go with the first one then.
Read the first one again.
First one was, why are we not purchasing property as a collective to house Black people?
Well, that would not be for the guest on the panel. Go to the second one.
Okay. Why are we not pushing proactive legislation to protect Oakland homeowners, i.e. freezes on property taxes and mortgages?
Okay.
I think
Go
we have a
all
lot.
at once.
I think we have a lot of opportunity. I mean, I'm just getting here, and if you are listening to any of the city council meetings, I'm calling for equity in everything, right? I serve the district that is most impacted in almost every area of disparity. And most of those disparities are placing Black people at the top or the bottom. I live in a district where our Blacks are unemployed, they're struggling, they're hungry, they're seeking housing, and we have some of the lowest income households facing even the 19% decline, if not more, during COVID. Our median income is $56,000 in East Oakland, District 7. That is not enough to sustain a family and allow a family to thrive in this generation or generations to come. And so I absolutely am supporting and uplifting equity in our policies and our legislation. We're working with stakeholders through the disparity study, with contractors and business owners and the African American Chamber. And we want you at the table around those policies that have been exclusionary, racially exclusionary practices and policies that have displaced Black residents and not have allowed us entry with a number of barriers. We advocated and passed the Fair Chance Housing Ordinance to ensure that those that we know who are formerly incarcerated, that are Black people and brown people, but mostly Black men, have access to come into even renting a home without that barrier. And so I'm fully committed to working with you, working to address the issues, working to address the policies. Vice Mayor Kaplan shared coming into this discussion that we've been working to address the racial discrimination by property appraisers. I've seen those media alerts, but you've been probably dealing with that much longer than what we're seeing coming up in the media. And so while we may not be able to legislate in that area locally through our city attorney's office, we can partner with our state and federal fair housing agencies to make sure that those laws address those issues. So where we may not be able to legislate, and it may for us at the local level, particularly for that issue, be about bringing about a lawsuit against an appraiser under state or federal law, we can also work to collaborate with our regional partners and leaders to advance policies and legislation that is more equitable and more data-driven and focused on those opportunities where we know that Blacks have been most impacted. And I am all for advancing that work with you and understanding how we can deliver more equitable outcomes for our community.
Wow, that's awesome. We only have a few more minutes. That was an awesome answer. But I want to jump to Janisha Smith's question, which is a passion of mine, which I have specific plans for, is what specific solutions and plans are being put in place to address, and you've done a little bit of Black homelessness in Oakland, which has a direct effect on real estate, our whole industry.
Well, I'll share a couple things, and of course, it's multiple parts. One example, which Director Latwe has put in the chat, is we passed one of the nation's only fair chance ordinance, which allows people re-entering from incarceration to have access to housing. That has been a major bar and barrier. Another step that the council took last year, you've heard about the program that the city has funded to prevent displacement, to help renters with emergency rent assistance. And one of the things that I worked on last year is that in the initial rollout of the rental assistance efforts, the emergency tenant assistance program, a very small percentage of Black people were being served by it. And so we made them bring a clear report and identify that data and what was going on. And it found out that the administration had given a no bid contract to one particular agency to run that program that did not have any track record or experience of successful outreach in Black communities. And so we brought that to council, and we insisted that the program be rolled out through a broader range of community partnership organizations that have that history and expertise. And in the more recent report, the ratio has improved. And so that is one example of a specific tangible example. But I want to share something else I'm currently actively working on and would love your help, which is this question about helping the homeless. It's essential that we mobilize public land for strategies that get people off the street, including rapid build modular housing that could be put up quickly, including the fact that right now FEMA is offering 100% reimbursement to cities to put the homeless up in hotel rooms, and these hotel rooms are vacant anyway. So we could put the homeless up in hotel rooms now. That FEMA funding goes through September. And then within 6 months, we could be building modular housing on publicly owned land. I've pasted in the chat the list of publicly owned land. We're working to identify which parcels would be best for that use. We welcome your suggestions about where those should go, or even if you know of a privately owned parcel that would be interested in being a site for some rapid build modular housing construction, because we could be putting up 1,000 units, in a matter of months. So working to identify some city-owned parcels to do that as well.
And I would just add to Vice Mayor Kaplan, and I'm not sure if Pamela is on with feedback from Councilmember Taylor, but we also have underutilized land and underutilized assets like hotels. And so we've been working to ensure that those underutilized hotels can be converted into not just temporary housing, but long-term housing. And we've been partnering with the county on that as well. One of the county's hotels that they stood up with the state support and the city's partnership during COVID is going to be transitioned into long-term family housing. And so where it was a temporary housing solution, we are looking to expand on what may have been temporary housing solutions with underutilized hotels and other properties into longer-term family sustaining housings at affordable rents and rates.
I would just add, and both of those are really important strategies to get people off the street. The hotels and dormitories, or frankly just buildings that can be cheaply kind of refashioned to get people off the street is a critical strategy of our 3P protection, preservation, and production effort at the city. We just we received about $36 million from the state. We won that in a competitive process. There are now almost 180 residents that were formerly homeless that are now housed in the former Clifton CCA dormitory, in at Temescal, and then a series of scattered homes in East Oakland. So this is a strategy that works. Again, I will go back to your first question, Wayne, which was like, what can this group do? We were only able to do that because we had the state's capital money coupled with some city resources and then a regulatory path, meaning that we were able to kind of move through some of the more, shall we say, cumbersome processes that are engaged that can make development really slow. We got a pass through that, and we were able to get those people off the street, and they are housed. And so more of that kind of resource is critical, along with the important services that these residents often need on site. So that is the message that if you are talking to your colleagues in Sacramento beyond. More of home key dollars and operating subsidy, please.
Awesome. Those are some, council member Kaplan, council member Reed, and Director Olatoye. Those are, those are like macro to micro, outstanding answers for homelessness. The final question of the night will be from Karen Shinoy, who works at the Bridge program. Not the Bridge program, but the the Real Estate Association, Bridge Real Estate Association. Do you believe there are opportunities to work with the Oakland Housing Authority to not only expand subsidized housing options, but also homeownership options for Oaklanders?
I'll take that. Oh, go ahead.
Go get it.
I'm not sure. I don't know if that was for the city council members, but
It was go ahead, Stephanie. But
I'll
I
give a brief
give them time to respond.
overview, because the voucher program is one of the most powerful programs that there is in the city of Oakland. Oakland Housing Authority has an extensive amount of vouchers that are solely for home ownership. 5% of their vouchers are for home ownership. And there was a point in time where they have over 100 people that use the vouchers, as I said, to purchase homes. And when they purchase the homes with the voucher, they keep all of the equity and the appreciation. It's generational wealth building. They can transfer their voucher to their children or their heirs if they want to. And we used to collaborate and work with the city of Oakland on that. I know that program is not as active as it used to be. I'm reaching out to them, but I would love to see the city also work with them. They used to do affordable housing projects together. I don't know what they're doing now, but it is my goal. And I think if people knew about the program, they would understand that, because the amount of people that can purchase, there's an opinion of people who are in Section 8, but there are people who are at 80% area median income with a 4-bedroom voucher that will probably pay $2,000 to $3,000 towards their mortgage, and that mortgage is paid as long as they're eligible. And there are people who purchased when I was there, and they purchased maybe $200,000, $300,000, and their homes are worth about $800,000, $900,000 now, and they are their homes. So I'm hoping that there's some kind of push to re-engage the Housing Authority to utilize this program, because it's on their books and it should be used. Those vouchers are there. That's money for home ownership. It is strictly there for home ownership.
I would just jump
Thank you.
in and just say, you should invite Patricia Wells to this conversation, who's the ED of the Oakland Housing Authority. And she will be the forceful advocate and person that she is about the work and resources that she has at her, that she's managing. The city of Oakland, via the housing department, we actually do have a partnership with a housing authority. We issue kind of comparable solicitations such to the development community, and then we then make decisions, and then those, when we are awarding our resources, those projects can be in the queue for those Section 8 resources. I will just say that the Housing Authority really they are at almost 100% utilization of their existing Section 8 resources. This is a level of detail that we may not want to go into, but the partnership is there, and one that I believe can certainly be deepened and expanded, particularly now that there are some additional federal resources that will be flowing to the Housing Authority. And as someone who ran the largest housing authority, I believe that there's a lot more we can be doing with those for the city as a whole.
Because those if you're speaking vouchers versus resources, the vouchers are there. It's just, I think it's more resources in terms of the staffing and all. So, but it's a conversation to be had.
Thank you. Thank you, Bet, that concludes our questions. At this point, I would like to thank our panelists for taking their time to participate in today's discussion. We appreciate getting their perspective on the important subject of housing in Oakland. And I'm in writing down the names of our city officials participating, and Stephanie Christmas as well. Councilmember Rebecca Kaplan, Councilmember Treva Reed, and Shola Olatoye, Pamela Ferrer. Listening to you talk, I just feel the energy. I feel a lot of energy. In fact, I feel like I drank a cup of coffee. I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight. I think we got good information. I see the passion that you have in pursuing what you're doing. This is public service. It's very valuable. We really appreciate it. I think that we are well represented, and I thank you for sharing your perspective and participating with us tonight. It also does not escape me that our speakers have been women, and I think that we're well represented by powerful, dynamic women in the city of Oakland. At this time, I'd like to then turn the discussion over to our Madam President, Imani Bro-Smith, for her closing thoughts.
Thank you so much to everyone who attended, to all of the council members, to Shola, Pam, Stephanie Christmas, and I am missing someone, to our moderator, Wayne Rowland, to Councilmember Treva Reed. But I really have to give a round of applause to everyone, to Ms. Georgia Richardson, who was our board of directors, and also our legislative co-chair for facilitating this event, and her consistency with just reaching out to everyone. Our goal of this event was to really just engage our local city officials, let them know about our Realtist organization, let you all know that we are here and we're ready to get to work. So please feel free to reach out to us. We definitely will be reaching out to you in regards to any housing matters so we can be of assistance. To everyone who has joined us this evening, thank you so much. Again, this is a great dialogue, and this is just the start. We hope to really get to work, and we look forward to future collaborations. Just a few things I want to do, a little house business before we go. For everyone who, again, I spoke about us being in Realtist Week. So this was almost the last of our few events that we have going on for this week, and this was an excellent, excellent event. Now, tomorrow we have an opportunity to meet in person. I think we may be sold out, but I'm putting it out there. We have an opportunity to network and Realtist and chill tomorrow at Plank from 5 to 8. I put our link in the chat, so hopefully there's some space available. If not, we look forward to seeing you during our next opportunity to meet in person. Lastly, we are hosting a Community Wealth Building Day this Saturday, so please feel free to share with the community. We want to be educating. Our goal is to educate, so we will go just dealing with all of the financial literacy fundamentals, talking about home ownership. We have a down payment assistance panel, and we actually will be having Mayor Libby Schaaf join us to give some remarks during the down payment assistance panel. So we hope that everyone can join us and also share the word.
Can I say one thing? I
Please.
just wanted to let everyone know that Bridge Association does have a closing cost grant, and we would love to give these funds away. They're $5,000 grants for government employees. They don't have to be first-time home buyers. I think it's just 120% area median income or less. It's on the Bridge Association, the association website, but please spend the money. It's there. $5,000. Somebody come get it.
And thank you so much. And this is why it's important to have forums to educate people about the funds that are there. We don't want to fight for the funds and then they be underutilized. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm going to, Mr. Georgia, please go ahead.
Okay, I just needed to acknowledge, I got word that Councilmember Gallo had a family emergency, and that's why he did not make it. And he gives his apologies. That would have been the one male representation that Wayne was referencing. But he did pass the message on that he had a family emergency and could not make it, and his apologies. And with that, I am just so thrilled. I feel like I've had a cup of coffee too, Wayne.
Mhm.
This has been very energizing. We appreciate all of you. We appreciate our members who've taken out time. We've had a full week. We're all exhausted. Have a good evening, and we look forward to future communication on a regular basis on issues and staying on top of these things that could make it each of our jobs a lot easier if we just had the discussion, if we are at the table to talk about these things when they, prior to them being put into effect, to get the kind of input that you need from those that are on, are on the ground running with this and know what we're dealing with on a daily basis. So that's all we ask, is to please just reach out and make us a part of that process. With that,
Bye.
Have a good evening, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Georgia.
welcome.
Great
Thank you
job.
for coming.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Miss Georgia.
Thank you.